Admiral Kyle Parker stood on the bridge of UES Liberty watching the final Zephyrian assault fleet approach Earth's solar system. His flagship was the last heavy cruiser in the human fleet after months of grinding warfare that had cost both sides far more than anyone had anticipated. The alien armada still outnumbered human forces 3-1, but Parker no longer cared about mathematical odds. War Marshal Vexner led the Zephyrian attack aboard his massive dreadnought Conquest of Stars. Surrounded by 47 remaining warships, the Marshal had requested additional reinforcements. Twice, but High Commander Vextar insisted that existing forces were sufficient to complete the conquest of humanity's homeworld. Admiral, all human vessels are in position around the outer planets, reported Captain Troy Manning from his position aboard the damaged cruiser HFY Story. The civilian evacuation ships have cleared Earth orbit and are heading for the outer colonies. Parker activated fleet communications so every human ship could hear his final address. All vessels, this is Admiral Parker aboard Liberty. The enemy comes to our home seeking to place chains on free people. Today we show them the price of threatening Earth itself. All ships prepare for combat. President Santos had refused evacuation from Earth despite the approaching enemy fleet. She remained in the capital coordinating with resistance leaders across human space and preparing for what might be humanity's final battle. Admiral Parker, this is President Santos. You have the full authority of Earth government to conduct this engagement as you see fit. Give them a fight they will never forget. The battle began when Zephyrian long-range missiles reached the outer defensive positions. Human ships scattered among the asteroid fields and moon bases, using every piece of cover available. While return fire lanced out toward the advancing enemy fleet, Captain Manning's cruiser took the first direct hit, but continued fighting even as atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. Liberty, this is Defiant. We have lost main engines and fire control is down to backup systems. Requesting permission to close with the enemy. Parker knew what Manning was asking and felt his heart sink. Troy, you still have escape pods and the chance to fight another day. Admiral, my ship is finished, but we can still hurt them. Besides, someone needs to show these aliens what happens when they threaten our home. Before Parker could respond, Manning's cruiser broke from the asteroid field and accelerated toward the Zephyrian dreadnought. Enemy fire converged on the small ship, but Defiant continued its final charge even as armor plating melted under alien plasma beams. War Marshal Vexner watched the approaching human vessel with growing alarm. Tactical officer, destroy that ship before it reaches our position. War Marshal, we are firing everything we have, but the human vessel continues to advance. Their commander appears to be steering manually toward our bridge section. Manning's ship slammed into Conquest of Stars at maximum velocity, creating a nuclear explosion that destroyed both vessels instantly. War Marshal Vexner died, never understanding why humans chose death over surrender even when facing certain extinction. The loss of their fleet commander sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian formation, but Sub-Commander Kextar assumed control and continued the attack. The aliens had come too far to retreat now, regardless of casualties or unexpected resistance. Admiral Parker led the remaining human ships in desperate charges against the advancing enemy, knowing that each attack brought them closer to total defeat. But defeat had never been the point of this battle. The point was making the Zephyrians pay such a terrible price for victory that they would never again consider humanity an easy target. Captain Lisa Stone commanded the last human destroyer when her ship's weapons finally failed completely. Admiral, this is Stone aboard U.S. Phoenix. We are out of missiles and our energy weapons are offline. Do we have permission to ram the nearest enemy cruiser? Lisa, you have done enough already. Save your crew and live to fight another day. Stone's response came back immediately. Admiral, with respect, there may not be another day for any of us. My crew has voted and we choose to go down fighting. Phoenix accelerated toward a Zephyrian heavy cruiser that tried desperately to avoid the collision. Stone's ship struck the alien vessel amidships, breaking both ships apart in brilliant nuclear fire that lit up the entire battle area. High Commander, Vexstar was monitoring the battle from his command ship at the edge of the solar system when he realized that something unprecedented was happening. The human fleet was completely destroyed but had taken 30 Zephyrian vessels with them, including the fleet commander's dreadnought. Sub-Commander Kexstar, report your status and casualties. Vexstar ordered as the shooting finally stopped after 18 hours of continuous combat. High Commander, we have achieved tactical victory, but at catastrophic cost. 60% of our assault fleet has been destroyed and War Marshal Vexnor is dead. The humans fought to complete extinction without a single vessel attempting to surrender. Vexstar stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of both fleets scattered across Earth's solar system. In 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, no enemy had ever inflicted such casualties while facing certain defeat. Admiral Parker's final transmission was broadcast on all frequencies as U.S. Liberty broke apart around him. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, we have shown the galaxy that humanity will never surrender our freedom. Continue the fight and remember that some things are worth dying for. The Admiral died at his post as Liberty's bridge collapsed, but his words were heard across human space where resistance fighters prepared to continue the war despite the loss of their main fleet. Dr. Lisa Warren had survived the battle aboard a communication ship and immediately began analyzing the psychological impact on Zephyrian forces. President Santos, the enemy achieved their tactical objectives, but their casualties were far beyond anything they have experienced in previous conquests. High Commander Vexstar was forced to make the most difficult decision in his military career. The human homeworld lay defenseless before his remaining ships, but the cost of occupation would require resources the Empire could no longer afford. Sub-Commander, prepare withdrawal orders for all Imperial forces in human space. Vexstar ordered as he reviewed casualty reports that would shock the entire Empire. High Commander, we have achieved victory. Why are we retreating from conquered territory? Vexstar looked at the tactical display one final time before answering. Sub-Commander, we have learned that some species cannot be conquered because they value freedom more than life itself. Mark human space as forbidden territory and issue orders that no Imperial forces will enter this region again. The Zephyrian fleet withdrew from Earth's solar system 12 hours after achieving complete military victory. High Commander Vexstar sent a priority message to the Imperial capital explaining why the conquest had been abandoned. Supreme Council, be advised that humanity represents a unique threat to Imperial expansion. This species does not surrender under any circumstances and will fight to complete extinction rather than accept foreign rule. Recommend immediate classification of human space as off-limits to all Imperial operations. President Santos addressed the surviving human populations from her office in the capital that had never fallen to enemy occupation. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, we have paid a terrible price for our independence, but we have shown the galaxy that free people cannot be conquered by force alone. Dr. Warren's final report on the war became required reading at military academies across human space. The Zephyrian Empire learned that humanity operates according to principles they cannot understand or predict. When faced with the choice between freedom and survival, we will choose freedom every time. The galaxy now contained a new constant that would influence interstellar politics for generations to come. One species had proven that military superiority meant nothing when facing an enemy that simply refused to surrender under any circumstances. High Commander Vexstar's final entry in the Imperial War records would be studied by alien strategists for centuries afterward. Humanity has demonstrated that some victories cost more than any defeat. They cannot be conquered because they will not be conquered. The Empire has gained nothing and lost everything in this campaign. Human space remained independent and free while the Zephyrian Empire issued galaxy-wide warnings about the dangerous species that had somehow made surrender impossible. The moment they realized humans do not surrender had changed everything. Admiral Kyle Parker was leading a desperate assault on the Zephyrian stronghold at Europa Station when the worst possible news reached him. His flagship UES Guardian had taken heavy damage, but the mission was too important to abandon. War Marshal Vexner had captured Admiral Parker's second-in-command during the disastrous Battle of the Neptune Yards. "Admiral, we have confirmed that Commander Rick Hayes was taken alive when his ship was disabled," reported Captain Diana Foster over the battle communications. "Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians plan to use him as leverage for surrender negotiations." Parker felt cold anger replace the tactical calculations running through his mind. The Zephyrians had captured one of humanity's most respected military leaders and would certainly try to trade his life for human capitulation. Every rational species would negotiate for the return of such an important prisoner. President Maria Santos contacted Parker directly from Earth, where emergency sessions were debating the proper response. "Admiral, the Zephyrians have sent a message through diplomatic channels. They offer to return Commander Hayes in exchange for immediate cessation of all resistance activities and formal surrender negotiations." "Madam President, what are your orders?" Parker asked while his ship continued fighting through the Europa Station defenses. He already knew what his answer would be, but military protocol required civilian authorization for his planned response. "Admiral, we will not negotiate with invaders under any circumstances. Commander Hayes knew the risks when he accepted command, and he would not want his capture to end human resistance. Proceed with rescue operations as you see fit." War Marshal Vexner was confident that capturing such a high-ranking human officer would finally break enemy morale. Every previous species had shown willingness to negotiate when important leaders were threatened with execution. He prepared for what he expected would be humanity's first serious attempt at ending hostilities. "Commander." Hayes was brought before the War Marshal in chains, but showed no sign of fear or submission. The human officer stood straight despite obvious injuries from his ship's destruction and looked directly at his captor without flinching. "Human Commander, you are Admiral Kyle Parker's second-in-command and one of your species' most important military leaders." Vexner began through a translation device. "Your government will certainly wish to secure your safe return through reasonable negotiations." Hayes actually smiled at the suggestion. "War Marshal, if you think capturing me will make humanity surrender, then you understand nothing about the people you are fighting. Commander, surely your leaders value your life enough to consider ending this pointless resistance. Your species has already lost dozens of worlds and millions of lives. How many more must die for the sake of primitive pride?" The human commander's expression never changed. "War Marshal, every person who has died in this war chose to die free rather than live as a slave. If humanity ransoms me by surrendering our independence, then those people died for nothing." Vexner found this response incomprehensible according to every psychological model in the Imperial database. "Commander, you speak as if individual lives mean nothing to your species. Do you not value survival above abstract concepts like freedom and independence?" "We value survival, War Marshal, but we value it for our children and our children's children. What use is survival if it means they grow up wearing chains we were too cowardice to break?" The interrogation continued for hours, but Hayes refused to provide any useful intelligence or show any sign of breaking under pressure. Vexner finally ordered the prisoner confined while he considered how to proceed with negotiations that were not proceeding as planned. Admiral Parker was already planning the rescue mission that would define the rest of the war. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Foster volunteered to lead the assault on the Zephyrian prison facility, despite knowing it was essentially a suicide mission. "Admiral, the prison complex is heavily defended and located deep inside enemy-controlled space," Foster reported during the mission briefing. "We estimate 80% casualties minimum and very low probability of successful extraction." Parker looked around the room at volunteers who had stepped forward for the mission. Every ship captain and assault team leader knew they were volunteering to die, but none showed any hesitation. "Colonel Foster, the mission is approved. Bring Rick Hayes home." The rescue fleet consisted of 12 ships carrying elite assault troops and was commanded by Captain Roy Hudson aboard the modified cruiser UES Fearless. The plan called for a direct assault on the prison complex followed by immediate withdrawal before Zephyrian reinforcements could respond. War Marshal Vexner was reviewing intelligence reports when alarms began sounding throughout his command ship. Human raiders had somehow penetrated deep into Imperial-controlled space and were attacking the maximum security prison where important captives were held. War Marshal, how did enemy forces reach the prison complex without detection by our patrol? Fleets? Demanded Sub-Commander Kekstar as tactical displays showed the developing battle. The humans appear to be using modified civilian vessels again, replied the tactical officer. They disguised their attack fleet as refugee ships fleeing the war zone. The battle for the prison complex lasted 4 hours and cost the rescue force 10 ships, including Foster's assault transport. But Lieutenant Colonel Foster succeeded in fighting her way to Hayes' cell and leading him to the extraction point before Zephyrian security forces could stop them. Colonel, what are your orders for withdrawal? Hayes asked as they fought through corridors filled with enemy soldiers. Foster had taken multiple wounds but continued leading her troops toward the landing bays. Commander, the plan calls for immediate extraction, but we have lost most of our ships. This mission was always intended to be one way. Hayes understood immediately and picked up weapons from fallen soldiers. Then we make them pay the highest possible price for capturing a human officer. Foster's final transmission was heard across the human fleet as her team fought to the last person. Guardian, this is Rescue Team Alpha. Package is secure and heading home. Tell Admiral Parker that nobody gets left behind. 2 ships escaped the prison complex carrying Commander Hayes and 17 surviving rescue team members. Foster and 63 other soldiers died in the assault, but had demonstrated something that sent shock waves through the Zephyrian Empire. High Commander Vexstar reviewed the battle reports with growing disbelief. War Marshal explained how a primitive species managed to penetrate our deepest security zones and rescue a captured officer. More importantly, explain why they sacrificed so many lives for one individual. Vexner had been asking himself the same questions since the rescue. High Commander, the humans appear to operate according to principles that our tactical computers cannot predict or understand. They value individual lives, but they value their collective freedom more. The rescue of Commander Hayes had cost humanity more casualties than many major battles, but the psychological impact on Zephyrian forces was devastating. Every alien soldier now knew that humans would never abandon their people no matter what the cost. Dr. Warren analyzed enemy communications following the rescue and found evidence of declining morale throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral, they are beginning to question whether conquering humanity is possible. Some of their officers are requesting transfers to other assignments. Admiral Parker welcomed Hayes back aboard Guardian and began planning the final phase of human resistance. The Zephyrians still controlled more ships and firepower, but they were fighting an enemy that could not be broken by conventional means. Rick, what did you learn during your captivity that might help us in the coming battles? Hayes looked at the star charts showing the advance toward Earth. Admiral, I learned that they expect us to behave like every other species they have conquered. When we refuse to follow their rules, we become something they cannot understand or predict. The war was entering its final phase, and both sides knew that everything would be decided in the next few battles. The Zephyrian Empire had never lost a conquest campaign, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Admiral Kyle Parker stood in the war room aboard U's Guardian as reports came in from across human space. The Zephyrian Empire had reinforced their invasion fleet and now controlled 6 human colonies, with more falling each week. Traditional military strategy suggested concentrating forces for a decisive battle, but Commander Nina Walsh had proposed something completely different. Admiral Protocol Phoenix is ready for implementation, Walsh reported while highlighting star charts on the main display. Instead of fighting the kind of war they expect, we scatter our remaining forces and begin asymmetric operations across multiple systems. Parker studied the tactical projections with growing interest. Phoenix called for abandoning fixed defenses and turning the entire human fleet into a mobile guerrilla force. Every ship would operate independently, hitting Zephyrian supply lines and retreat before enemy reinforcements could respond. Commander, this strategy means giving up any hope of defending our major colonies in conventional terms. Are you certain this approach will work better than massed fleet action? Walsh pulled up intelligence reports from Dr. Warren's xenology team. Admiral, every previous Zephyrian conquest followed the same pattern. They defeat the enemy fleet, then occupy major population centers and wait for surrender. They have no experience with extended guerrilla campaigns or populations that continue resisting after military defeat. The Admiral made his decision, and within hours Protocol Phoenix was activated across the human fleet. Captain Chris Taylor took command of a mixed squadron of destroyers and converted civilian ships with orders to raid enemy shipping in the outer systems. Commander Alex Martinez led Special Forces teams to organize resistance cells on already occupied worlds. War Marshal Vexner was reviewing conquest reports when the first guerrilla attacks began. Human raiders hit 3 supply convoys in a single day, using tactics that violated every established rule of civilized warfare. The attacks came without warning from ships that disappeared immediately after striking. Sub-Commander Kekstar explained how primitive human vessels managed to destroy our supply ships and escape without engaging our patrol fleets, the War Marshal demanded during an emergency staff meeting. War Marshal, the humans appear to be using civilian vessels modified with military weapons. They strike fast and retreat before our response forces can intercept. Their tactics show no regard for honorable combat or proper military protocol. Vexner felt growing frustration with an enemy that refused to fight according to established rules. Deploy additional patrol squadrons and increase security around all supply routes. These raids must be stopped before they disrupt our operational schedule. Captain Taylor was leading exactly the kind of mission that was driving Zephyrian commanders to distraction. His modified freighter UES Wasp had been refitted with military-grade weapons but still looked like a harmless cargo vessel. The ship approached a Zephyrian supply convoy escorted by 2 light cruisers. "Captain, we are being scanned by the lead escort," reported Lieutenant Jenny Fox from the sensor station. "They are requesting identification and cargo manifests." Taylor activated the fake transponder signals prepared by human intelligence. "Send them the mining ship identification and tell them we are carrying processed metals to the occupied colonies. Let them think we are collaborators." The Zephyrians allowed Wasp to approach within weapons range before Taylor dropped the pretense and opened fire. His ship destroyed both escort vessels and half the supply convoy before enemy reinforcements could respond. The raiders were gone within minutes, leaving wreckage and confusion behind on the occupied colony of New Boston. Resistance leader Dr. Pete Jordan was organizing something even more dangerous than space raids. The Zephyrians had installed a occupation government and expected normal civilian cooperation, but they were about to learn that humans had different ideas about living under foreign rule. Dr. Jordan, the Zephyrians have announced mandatory registration for all human civilians, reported Resistance member Kate Roberts. They want complete identity records and work assignments for every person on the planet. Jordan looked at the proclamation. With cold anger, Kate passed the word to all resistance cells. No human cooperates with registration. Anyone who tries to enforce these orders becomes a legitimate target. The uprising began 3 days later when human workers across New Boston refused to report for assigned duties. Zephyrian occupation forces tried to arrest the protest leaders but found themselves facing armed resistance from ordinary civilians who had decided that death was preferable to slavery. Sub-Commander Raxonar was in charge of New Boston and could not understand why the human population was choosing violence over peaceful compliance. These people were offered fair treatment under imperial law. Why do they prefer bloodshed to cooperation? His aide consulted reports from other occupied worlds. Sub-Commander, we are receiving similar reports from every human colony. The civilian populations refuse to accept occupation authority and continue organizing armed resistance despite heavy casualties. The rebellion on New Boston cost 3,000 human lives but inspired resistance movements across occupied space. Dr. Jordan died leading an attack on the Zephyrian administrative center, but his final message was broadcast to every human world. Citizens, of humanity, we have shown that free people cannot be conquered by force alone. Continue the fight and never accept chains even when they promise safety. High Commander Vexstar was forced to request additional reinforcements as the human resistance spread beyond all previous calculations. His tactical computers had predicted complete conquest within 3 months, but 6 months later the humans were fighting harder than ever. Commander Martinez was training resistance fighters on the occupied world of New Austin when word came of the New Boston Uprising. The Zephyrians controlled the major cities, but human guerrillas controlled the countryside and made enemy movement extremely dangerous. Commander, the aliens are offering rewards for information about resistance leaders, reported local fighter Susan Clark. Some people are starting to consider collaboration for the safety of their families. Martinez understood the terrible choice facing civilian populations, but also knew that surrender would make their sacrifice meaningless. Susan, anyone who collaborates with the enemy becomes an enemy. We cannot save everyone, but we can make sure that freedom survives even if we do not. Admiral Parker received regular reports from guerrilla commanders and realized that Protocol Phoenix was working better than anyone had hoped. The Zephyrians controlled territory but faced constant attacks that prevented them from establishing effective occupation governments. Dr. Warren analyzed intercepted enemy communications and found growing evidence of Zephyrian frustration. Admiral, their supply situation is becoming critical, and they are requesting additional security forces from other parts of the Empire. We are forcing them to commit resources they never expected to need. Parker looked at star charts showing human resistance activity across dozens of worlds. Dr. Warren, the question is whether we can maintain this level of operations long enough to convince them that conquering humanity costs more than it is worth. The answer would come sooner than anyone expected as War Marshal Vexner prepared for the final assault on Earth itself. The Zephyrian Empire had never faced an enemy like humanity and was beginning to question whether some victories were worth winning. Captain Beth Reynolds watched the Zephyrian fleet approach through the tactical display aboard UES Valor. 15 human ships faced 75 alien vessels in the Titan system where mining platforms dotted the asteroid belt. The math was simple and brutal, but Reynolds had stopped worrying about odds the moment shooting started. War Marshal Vexner had divided his fleet into 3 attack groups, expecting quick victory against the scattered human defenses. His computer systems calculated 90% probability of human surrender within 4 hours of engagement. The calculations had never been wrong before when facing other species. The first, Zephyrian missiles reached human positions at maximum range and Reynolds ordered immediate evasive action. Her ships scattered into the asteroid field using the massive rocks for cover while return fire lanced out toward the advancing enemy. 3 human destroyers took direct hits in the opening minutes but kept fighting even with severe damage. Captain Reynolds, this is Destroyer UES Phoenix, came the voice of Commander Troy manning over the communications system. We have lost main engines and weapons are down to 40%, requesting permission to ram the nearest enemy cruiser. Reynolds felt her heart skip as she realized what Manning was asking. Troy, you have escape pods and the enemy might accept surrender from damaged vessels. Captain, my crew voted and we would rather die fighting than live as prisoners. Besides, ramming attacks might teach these aliens something about the cost of invading human space. Before Reynolds could respond, Manning's destroyer broke from cover and accelerated toward the closest Zephyrian ship. The aliens tried to destroy the small vessel, but Phoenix slammed into their cruiser at full speed, creating a brilliant explosion that lit up the asteroid field. Both ships vanished in nuclear fire. War Marshal Vexner stared at his tactical display in complete confusion. The humans had just sacrificed an entire ship and crew rather than surrender when clearly defeated. His combat computers immediately recalculated human morale factors, but the results made no sense according to established psychological profiles. The battle continued for 6 more hours, as human ships fought with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. Captain Reynolds lost 8 vessels, including her own, when UES Valor took a direct hit from Zephyrian plasma cannons. Her last transmission was heard across the human fleet as her ship broke apart around her. All human vessels, this is Captain Reynolds. We have shown them that freedom is not free and independence must be earned in blood. Continue the fight and make them pay for every inch of space they take. By the end of the engagement, only 3 human ships remained operational, while the Zephyrians had lost 12 vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers. War Marshal Vexner had won a decisive tactical victory, but the cost was far higher than any previous conquest in Imperial history. Lieutenant Gary Stone was pulled from the wreckage of his fighter craft 2 hours after the shooting stopped. The young pilot had continued flying attack runs even after his weapons were destroyed and his ship was on fire. Zephyrian soldiers brought him before War Marshal Vexner for interrogation. Human pilot, explain why your forces continued fighting when defeat was obvious. The War Marshal demanded through a translation device. My computers calculated that your species should have surrendered when losses reached 30%, but you fought until 90% casualties. Stone looked up at the towering alien commander with blood running down his face from multiple injuries. Because this is our home and we do not quit when someone tries to take our home away from us. But surely survival is more important than territory. Your species could have lived as honored members of the Empire instead of dying for empty space and worthless rocks. The pilot actually smiled despite his injuries. War Marshal, you do not understand what you are fighting. We are not defending territory or resources. We are defending the right to choose our own path among the stars. That is worth any price. Vexner dismissed the prisoner and called for his senior officers to meet in the command center. The battle analysis showed results that violated every established model of alien psychology and military doctrine. No species had ever continued fighting after losing more than half their forces, but humans seemed to grow more determined with each defeat. War Marshal, perhaps the humans were simply too primitive to understand their situation, suggested Subcommander Kekstar. Less advanced species sometimes fight longer due to ignorance of modern warfare. No, Vexner replied while studying casualty reports. Their tactics were sophisticated and their technology was more advanced than we expected. They chose to fight knowing they would lose because something else was more important to them than survival. The War Marshal sent a priority message to High Commander Vextar explaining the battle results and requesting additional reinforcements. The human military was stronger than anticipated, and their willingness to accept casualties was beyond anything in Zephyrian experience. Admiral Parker received news of the Titan battle while preparing defenses around the Neptune colonies. The loss of Captain Reynolds and her fleet was devastating, but their sacrifice had provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and tactics. Dr. Warren analyzed the Zephyrian communications intercepts from the battle and found evidence of growing concern among alien commanders. Admiral, they are requesting reinforcements and expressing confusion about human combat psychology. I think we surprised them with our refusal to surrender. Beth Reynolds and her people bought us time with their lives, Parker replied. We need to make sure their sacrifice was not wasted. The next phase of the war would test human resolve even further as Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, and the aliens adapted their tactics for an enemy that refused to acknowledge defeat. War Marshal Vexner was beginning to understand that conquering humanity would require total extermination rather than simple military victory. On Earth, President Santos addressed the global population with news of the Titan battle. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, our brave defenders have shown the galaxy that humanity will not surrender our freedom without the greatest possible cost to our enemies. The fight continues and we will prevail because we fight for something the Zephyrians cannot understand or defeat. The Zephyrian Empire was learning a hard lesson about the price of forcing a free people into chains. Some prices were too high even for the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Nexus Prime, and Admiral Kyle Parker wished the news from Earth was better. His flagship UES Guardian hung in space near the outer colonies, watching long-range sensors that showed exactly what they all feared. 47 Zephyrian warships had appeared at the edge of the system and were moving steadily toward human space. President Maria Santos appeared on the communication screen looking tired but determined. She had been in emergency meetings for the past week as reports came in from scouts and intelligence operatives. Admiral Parker, what is your assessment of the situation? Madam President, the Zephyrian fleet is larger and more advanced than anything we can field. Our best estimates give them overwhelming firepower advantage. However, our ships are faster and more maneuverable, which might help in a running fight. Dr. Lisa Warren had returned to Earth after the diplomatic mission and now served as the government's chief advisor on alien affairs. She appeared on screen beside the president looking worried. Admiral, we have been analyzing Zephyrian communications since their fleet arrived. Something interesting has emerged from the data. Parker leaned forward in his command chair. What kind of something, Dr. Warren? Their battle tactics appear to be based on psychological warfare as much as raw firepower. Every species they have conquered in the past 3,000 years surrendered after losing roughly 30% of their military forces. The Zephyrians seem to expect quick capitulation rather than prolonged resistance. The Admiral considered this information carefully. Human military doctrine emphasized fighting to the last possible moment, but perhaps other species thought differently about survival. Dr. Warren, are you suggesting that they might not be prepared for an extended campaign? Exactly, Admiral. Their logistics and strategy appear designed for short, decisive actions followed by immediate surrender negotiations. They have never faced an enemy willing to fight past the normal breaking point. President Santos looked directly at the camera. Admiral Parker, I need to know honestly what our chances are if we choose to fight. Parker had run the numbers a dozen times and they never improved. Madam President, if we face them in direct fleet engagement, we will lose badly. Our only hope is to make them pay such a high price that they decide conquering humanity is not worth the cost. And if we surrender now, then we become another subject species in their empire. Our children grow up as citizens of a government we never chose, and our independence ends forever. The president was quiet for a long moment before responding. Admiral, I want you to prepare our defenses, but do not engage unless they attack first. We still hope diplomacy might prevent bloodshed. 2 hours later, War Marshal Wexner contacted the human fleet directly. His image appeared on screens throughout the Guardian, showing another tall gray alien, but this one wore elaborate military decorations and carried weapons designed for combat rather than ceremony. Human Commander, I am War Marshal Wexner of the Imperial Fifth Fleet. Your species was offered membership in the Empire 3 months ago. That offer has now expired. You have 72 hours to surrender your military forces and submit to Imperial authority. Admiral Parker stood before the camera in his best dress uniform. Behind him, the bridge crew continued their duties with calm efficiency. War Marshal Wexner, I am Admiral Kyle Parker of the Earth Defense Forces. Humanity appreciates your offer, but we must respectfully decline. We govern ourselves and have no desire to change that arrangement. The alien's forearms moved in what might have been surprise or anger. Admiral Parker, you speak as if you have a choice in this matter. My fleet carries enough firepower to reduce your worlds to dust. Surely you can see the wisdom in peaceful submission. War Marshal, we can see the size of your fleet clearly. We can also see that you have come to our home uninvited and are making demands backed by threats of violence. If you wish war, then you will have it, but do not expect us to surrender our freedom without a fight. Wexner made that grinding sound. That passed for Zephyrian laughter. Admiral, your species shows spirit, but spirit cannot defeat superior technology in numbers. Do not sacrifice your people for the sake of pride. Parker felt anger rising, but kept his voice level and professional. War Marshal, our people value freedom more than safety and independence more than survival. If you choose to attack us, you will discover exactly what that means. The communication ended abruptly, and Parker turned to his tactical officer. Commander, how long until they reach the outer colonies? 18 hours, Admiral, assuming they maintain current speed and course. The next day brought frantic activity as civilian transports fled the outer settlements while military vessels took defensive positions. Parker had spread his forces across 3 systems, hoping to force the aliens into multiple engagements rather Then one decisive battle, Dr. Warren called from Earth with more intelligence updates. Admiral, we have intercepted more Zephyrian communications. They appear genuinely puzzled by our refusal to surrender. Their computer models keep predicting human capitulation within hours of the first engagement. Let them stay puzzled, Dr. Warren. Maybe confusion will give us some small advantage. The Zephyrian fleet reached the mining colonies at dawn ship time. War Marshal Vexner sent one final message before the shooting started. Admiral Parker, this is your last opportunity to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Surrender now and your people will be treated with honor. Parker broadcast his response on all frequencies so every human ship could hear. All vessels, this is Admiral Parker. The enemy offers us chains decorated with pretty words. Our answer is the same as it has always been. We are free people and we will remain free people. All ships prepare for combat. The first Zephyrian missiles began flying toward human positions 30 minutes later. War Marshal Vexner had expected to face desperate resistance followed by quick surrender. Instead, he discovered that humans had a very different idea about when a fight was truly over. Captain Beth Reynolds, commanding the defense of the Titan mining platform, sent a message that would be remembered long after the battle ended. Guardian, this is Captain Reynolds aboard UES Valor. The enemy is closing fast and we are outnumbered 5-1. Tell my family I died free. The shooting had started and Admiral Parker knew that everything would change in the next few hours. The galaxy was about to learn something new about the human species and their relationship with the concept of surrender. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as it approached Nexus Prime Station. The massive structure hung in space like a metal flower with dozens of docking arms reaching out in all directions. Ships from across the galaxy came here to trade and meet in neutral territory. Today would mark the first official contact between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire, DR. Lisa Warren checked her translation equipment one more time. She had spent months learning what little they knew about Zephyrian language from intercepted communications. The aliens had been watching human expansion into space for the past year with growing interest. Their message had been simple and direct. They wanted to meet and discuss humanity's future in the galaxy. Colonel Sam Brooks adjusted his dress uniform and made sure his sidearm was properly secured. He did not expect trouble at a diplomatic meeting, but old habits kept soldiers alive. The Zephyrians controlled over 300 worlds according to their intelligence reports. Humanity had barely colonized 20 systems in comparison. The docking procedure went smoothly, and within an hour the human delegation walked through pristine corridors toward the central meeting chamber. Other alien species moved through the station going about their business. Most ignored the humans completely while a few stared with curious eyes at the newcomers. The meeting chamber was enormous with a curved ceiling that showed images of stars and nebulae. A long table dominated the center with chairs designed for different alien body types. 3 Zephyrians waited at the far end of the table. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces had no visible nose and their eyes were completely black without any white showing. High Commander Vextar stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. His voice sounded like grinding metal, but the words were clear. Welcome humans to Nexus Prime. I am High Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. We have watched your species with great interest as you take your first steps into the larger galaxy. Captain Morrison moved forward and offered a formal bow. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, High Commander. I am Captain Jake Morrison representing Earth and the human colonies. This is Dr. Lisa Warren, our chief linguist, and Colonel Sam Brooks, our military advisor. The High Commander gestured for them to sit at the table. The chairs were uncomfortable for human bodies, but they managed. Your species shows promise, Captain Morrison. Your ships are well designed and your expansion has been methodical and careful. The Empire values such qualities in new members. Dr. Warren leaned forward slightly. Members, High Commander? We were told this would be a discussion about trade agreements and peaceful coexistence. High Commander Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. Dr. Warren, surely you understand that a species as young as yours cannot survive alone in this galaxy. There are dangers you cannot imagine and enemies you have never encountered. The Empire offers protection and guidance to all worthy species. Colonel. Brooks kept his expression neutral, but Morrison could see tension in the man's shoulders. What exactly does membership in your empire involve, High Commander? Simple terms, Captain Morrison. Your species acknowledges the authority of the Empire in all matters of galactic importance. You contribute ships and resources to the common defense. Your worlds govern themselves in local matters but follow imperial law in everything else. In return, you receive protection from hostile forces and access to technology beyond your current understanding. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was not the partnership they had hoped for. And if we prefer to remain independent while maintaining friendly relations? The three Zephyrians exchanged glances before the High Commander responded. Captain Morrison, no species in this galaxy remains truly independent. You either accept the protection of a strong empire or you become prey for others who are less generous than we are. The choice seems obvious. Dr. Warren activated her recording device. High Commander, could you help us understand what happened to species who chose to remain independent in the past? They no longer exist, Dr. Warren. Some fell to raiders and pirates. Others were conquered by empires less benevolent than ours. A few simply vanished when they encountered forces beyond their ability to handle. Independence is a luxury that young species cannot afford. Morrison stood up slowly and his companions followed his lead. High Commander, I appreciate your offer, but humanity will need time to consider such an important decision. We value our independence and the right to determine our own path among the stars. High Commander Vextar's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. Captain Morrison, I fear you do not understand the realities of galactic politics. The Empire does not make offers lightly, nor do we make them twice. Your species has potential, but potential means nothing without wisdom to guide it. We understand the risks, High Commander, but we also understand the value of freedom. Humanity has fought long and hard to govern itself, and we will not give up that right easily. The alien leader stood to his full imposing height. Then you choose a dangerous path, Captain Morrison. The galaxy is not kind to those who refuse the guidance of their betters. I hope your species proves wiser than your words suggest today. Morrison offered another formal bow. Thank you for your time, High Commander. We will convey your message to our leaders and respond through proper diplomatic channels. The human delegation left the station within 2 hours. As their ship pulled away from Nexus Prime, Morrison could not shake the feeling that they had just made a very powerful enemy. Dr. Warren was already preparing her report while Colonel Brooks checked intelligence updates from Earth. Captain Brooks said quietly, I think we should prepare for the possibility that our next meeting with the Zephyrians will not be quite so civilized. Morrison nodded as he watched the stars through the view screen. Humanity had just announced to a galactic empire that they would not bow down and accept subjugation. He wondered if their species was brave or simply too stubborn to recognize the danger they now faced.